It's in the letter written by James in the New Testament that we read these words, "Be swift to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger." This past week, I listened a lot. I spoke a little. I reserved my anger for those who perpetuated hate or division, whether by acts of violence and intimidation, such as notes passed or threats yelled in schools telling Hispanic students to go back home, racial slurs or symbols painted on public property, emails sent to black first-year students at the University of Pennsylvania or other universities threatening violence or showing images of lynching, or whether it be more acceptable acts of violence and intimidation, like social media posts which demean those who hold different viewpoints from our own. I focused my listening less on those who were perpetuating division and violence, less on those who were simply trying to justify their own choices. I focused my listening more on those who were sharing the nature of their real fears and sadness. Let me give an example. A young man that I know and love very much wrote, "I feel sad today, not because of any desires I had for either candidate to be or not to be president. I feel sad because so many of my friends, relatives, and colleagues have been denounced and slandered by the person who will now hold the executive office of the country. Before foreign policy, before economic systems, before any kind of political allegiance, the people of this country should feel like their leader respects them as individuals and will defend their dignities. That such an overwhelming number of the country cannot say that, and that the offender seems to have no remorse for those opinions, makes me sad." Already at the outset this morning, I want to encourage you to be swift to listen this morning, slow to speak, slow to anger. Because my sense is that some of you heard that, and you immediately thought of all the reasons why you can dismiss it. Or you became offended that I shared anything from the pulpit that might reflect poorly on the person you voted for. If that's your primary concern this morning, then you're part of the problem. I focused on listening to those who were sharing the nature of their real fears and sadness. I also focused on listening to messages of reconciliation and understanding. That very same person went on to write, "Do not leave the country. Do not make empty declarations and promises. Do not add further dissent to an already obviously divided nation. Presidencies come and go, nations rise and fall. All that is material is fallible. May we not forfeit any of our honor and dignity as individuals in the wake of this great national divide. May we instead respect the system that still allows people to choose, and in light of that, continue to be the best people we can." Other voices, messages of reconciliation and understanding. Ben Carson, African-American neurosurgeon, Republican primary presidential candidate, subsequent supporter of Donald Trump and likely a member of his cabinet. He wrote this almost 2 months ago. Boy, how relevant it is today, but I believe deeply that it still speaks for him today. He wrote, while much of America seems to be getting more and more divisive, I'm going to be holding doors for strangers, letting people cut in front of me in traffic, greeting all I meet, exercising patience with others, and smiling at strangers. I'll do this as often as I have the opportunity. I will not stand idly by and let children live in a world where unconditional love is invisible and being rude is acceptable. Join me in showing love and respect to others. Find your way to swing the pendulum in the direction of love, because today, sadly, hate is gaining ground. Love must begin somewhere, and love will overcome hate. Imagine the difference if we each purposefully love a little more. A friend of mine, pastor of the Hagerstown, Maryland Church of the Brethren, Paul Mundy, wrote, I would encourage us to look to a leader who had lots of experience with the divided nation, Abraham Lincoln. In Lincoln's famed second inaugural address, he voiced in the most bitter phrase of the Civil War, Lincoln provided these counterintuitive words. Hear them. With malice toward none. With charity for all. With firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, to do all which may achieve and cherish the just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. So many words in that could be an entire sermon in and of themselves. Malice toward none. Charity for all. Strive to bind up the nation's wounds. Do all that we can to achieve and cherish not just peace. Not peace that says just shut up. A just and lasting peace. First grade teacher, known only by her signature, Mrs. Nagy, wrote this note to her first graders on November 9th of this year. Good morning, first graders. As many of you have probably heard, we have a new president of our country. The president makes big decisions for our country, but you get to make big decisions as well. Choose to be kind people. Choose to do the right thing. Choose to love the things that make us all different and special. You don't have to be a grown-up to help make our country a better place. Bear with me as I read from one more individual, also unknown to me, except by his name, Kevin G. Cook. As I reflected and tried to think what I might write and post to share my heart in this moment, I came across his post and it spoke so much for what was in my heart. I could have written pretty much the entire thing myself, maybe with a few exceptions, except that I'm not quite as good a writer as I felt he was and is. He entitled this Post-Election Message to Christians. He started with a disclaimer. I didn't support either candidate, but I am shocked that Donald Trump won the presidency of the United States of America. I certainly thought Hillary Clinton would win, and I'd be serving as peacemaker to disgruntled conservatives considering rebellion. But perhaps even more so, I am absolutely shocked and appalled at how Christians are responding on social media. First part then, he says, to Christian Clinton supporters. I know you're upset. I'm sure that you, like I, have seen countless Facebook posts, tweets, and articles articulating a fearful response to the impending political overhaul. I have three responses, particularly to those who claim to be Christian and reacting in this way. Again, to Christian Clinton supporters. Number one, stop exaggerating the narrative. Not all Trump supporters are racist, xenophobic, Islamophobic, homophobic, white supremacists wanting to repeal the civil rights movement. Stop exaggerating the narrative. In fact, the vast majority are simply faithful Republicans with different political ideology who believe in small government and conservative economics and are just tired of big government overreach and political insider collusion. Understand the differences and don't breed hate. To Christian Clinton supporters, number two, ask why and listen. If someone you know voted for Donald Trump, it doesn't mean they're racist or want to deport Muslims. Don't blame them for their vote. Instead, reach out to them, buy them a coffee, and have a conversation. Ask them why they were able to look past Trump's language and behavior and what they're looking forward to, and listen with an open mind instead of refuting. Number three, be the church. Christ is Lord, not Caesar, not Obama, not Trump. Government politics is certainly one way to enact change, progress, and hope, but the primary agency of God is the church, not the state. The church is the place where Christ transforms people, culture, and institutions. If you've placed your faith in Barack Obama, the Supreme Court nominations, in Hillary Clinton, in the NYSE, or any other institution, repent and turn back to Jesus. Be the church and allow Christ to reign in your life and transform our culture from the church outward. To Christian Trump supporters, congratulations. Your candidate won. So, like Micah 6:8 says, act justly, love mercy, walk humbly with God. I have three responses for you as well. Number one, stop vilifying liberals. Not all who voted for Hillary Clinton are politically corrupt, morally debunked, socialist, welfare-abusing, fear-mongering liberals wanting to live off the hard work of others. In fact, the vast majority of Democrats simply believe in empowering greater government influence to regulate businesses and institutions and to protect a pluralistic culture's freedoms. Understand your differences, but don't breed hate. Number two, try to understand the fear. You might not understand it. You might think people are exaggerating, but whether legitimate or not, groups of people are feeling afraid for their civil rights, personal security, and social regression. Instead of ignoring them, rejecting them, or slandering them, listen to them. If someone you know voted for Clinton, buy them a cup of coffee and have a conversation. Ask them why they were able to look past Clinton's mistrust, records, negligence in voting, and why they are afraid of Trump's presidency. And listen with an open mind instead of refuting. Number three, be the church. Christ is Lord. Donald Trump is president, not king. He is a savior. He is not a savior. He is not the one to bring about transformation in society. If you are putting your hope in our political system to change the culture, you will be sorely disappointed. Even more so as our divided nation struggles with fear of oppression and regression, be agents of peace. Be the church who welcomes all people with open arms. Care for others not like you. Minister to the homeless, the refugee, the socially marginalized. If you find your heart leaning towards an exuberantly proud conservative nationalism, repent and turn back to Jesus, the true King. The primary agency of God is the church, not the state. Be the church and allow Christ to transform the culture by creating safe places for all people. To Christians who supported neither candidate, this author says, my people. He puts himself in that category. We have an obligation as those who stand in the gap, who shared in the conviction of not being able to vote for either of these two candidates. We need to be peacemakers, bridge builders, and conversation starters. We need to be the active healers to encourage cross-aisle listening and create safe spaces for those who feel afraid and oppressed. We need to be a witness to Jesus' kingship and a prophetic voice to the culture. Most of all, as we stand in the middle, we need to be ambassadors of Christ's love. Don't be silent. Your calming presence is needed. Be a peacemaker. Jens, may God bless America. Help our nation heal its divisions. Keep us safe in this season and bring us peace. I did a lot of listening. It wasn't just to the voices of others. In addition to listening to those who were expressing their very real fears and sadness, in addition to listening to those who were voices of understanding and voices of reconciliation, I especially focused on listening to God's voice in the Scriptures. I know I've done a lot of reading this morning, but bear with me as I read some more. The passage that Bob read for us from Romans chapter 12 in a slightly different translation. Don't just pretend to love others. Really love them. Hate what is wrong. Hold tightly to what is good. Love each other with genuine affection and take delight in honoring each other. Never be lazy, but work hard and serve the Lord enthusiastically. Rejoice in our confident hope. Be patient in trouble and keep on praying. When God's people are in need, be ready to help them. Always be eager to practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Don't curse them. Pray that God will bless them. Boy, this next one's going to be a little tough. Be happy with those who are happy. Really? And weep with those who weep. Yeah. Live in harmony with each other. Don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people, and don't... Oh, wait a minute. Make sure I thought that. And don't think you know it all. Oh, that's sneak in there. You guys better look it up and see if that's really there when you go home. Romans 12. Okay? Your translation may say, don't be conceited. I guess it's the same thing, isn't it? Never pay back evil with more evil. Do things in such a way that everyone can see you are honorable. Do all that you can to live in peace with everyone. Don't let evil conquer you, but conquer evil by doing good. Philippians 2 was also much on my heart. And I listened to the words of Paul. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble. Think of others as better than yourselves. And then this verse, don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too. Don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too, or look out for their interests. The very next verse, you must have the same attitude that Jesus Christ had. Oh, what attitude was that? Well, the attitude that though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges, took the humble position of a slave, was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on the cross. Be like that in this context. Church, let's humble ourselves. Let's be willing to die for the other, whoever the other is. Let's be their servant. Don't look out only for your own interests, but look out for the interests of others. Be like Jesus in that regard. I would summarize my words in 3 words. You've already heard them from the pen of someone else. The first word is listen. Capital letters. Listen. If your candidate lost, please refrain from publicly or privately trying to shame those who voted for Mr. Trump by saying things like, I don't see how anyone could vote for him, or anyone who voted for him obviously doesn't respect women or minorities, or by posting photos of stories of Trump supporters doing terrible things and implying that whoever voted for him is partly responsible or would do the same things themselves. I've seen all of that. Listen. There are many different reasons for people voting the way they did on all sides. Take time to ask genuinely what those reasons are, not in order to prove them invalid, but to understand. Listen, learn. You don't have to agree. Understanding another's concerns, convictions, and fears does nothing to diminish yours. Rather, it enriches you. It enlarges your circle of friends. It actually adds to your credibility when it comes your time to speak. If your candidate won, please refrain from publicly or privately shaming those who voted against him by asking them to get over it already or to stop whining, or by posting anything designed to make yourself look better by demeaning those who voted against Trump and are protesting, crying, or whatever. When you do that, you disrespect people and invalidate their very real feelings, fears, and concerns. You also reinforce the perception of Mr. Trump that kept many people from voting for him in the first place, based on things he hopefully carelessly said. Listen, learn, you don't have to agree. You lose nothing by understanding another's concerns, convictions, and fears. You gain. America gains. Listen. Without judging. Listen out of respect. Listen to really try to understand. Listen so that you might learn something. Listen is a way of building peace. An interesting video I saw, I think this was actually before the election. I don't know the man's name. He was an African-American gentleman. He had acknowledged, in talking in this conversation, he mentioned that he had some previous White House experience, not in the Oval Office, but in some capacity or another. He intentionally went to an extended family of people who agreed to be part of this conversation. There were probably 10 or 12 young people, adults in this room. He was in their home. And they allowed this conversation to be filled, and they were all people who had gone on record that they would be voting for Mr. Trump. And they had a conversation, and he listened. He listened to their fears. He listened to their frustrations. He listened to their reasons. And some of them he challenged. Some of them he asked more questions to. And then he offered some different perspective. And they listened to him. And they had a conversation. And when it was over, they all gathered around and said, "Can we have our picture taken with you?" Folks, it can happen. It can happen. Number one, listen. Number two, pray. I don't say that glibly. Paul tells us to pray for those in authority, to pray for our leaders so that we might live quiet and peaceable lives in all godliness. I want to challenge you this morning. If you are more energized at the thought of waiting and watching for Donald Trump to fail as the president, more than you are willing to pray for his success, then you are part of the problem. If you feel more energized to wait and watch for him to fail than you do to pray for his success, you are part of the problem. President Obama set the mood, set the attitude, the response when he declared in the context of his meeting with Donald Trump the other morning, wishing for his success because he said, when you succeed, we all succeed. Pray for him. Pray that God would give him wisdom. Pray that God would use those strong parts of his personality to lead with strength, to not listen to people he shouldn't listen to. Pray for discernment to know who to listen to as he seeks guidance. Pray that the office would change him in good ways, as many presidents have experienced. Feeling the weight of the responsibility, the weight of the care of this nation. It's a lot more difficult than just talking points and just stirring up a crowd. Pray. Thirdly, take action. Now, I know that needs a little elaboration. I want to challenge all of you, take action, become a defender of any of the causes or concerns the other person with, I'm not getting this out right, become a defender of any of the causes or concerns of the other person, whoever that is, the person on the other side of the issues. Find some of, after you've listened to them, find some causes or concerns with which you can agree and become a defender or a champion of those causes. I mean, imagine if everyone who voted for Donald Trump took it upon themselves to help people feel safe and respected who belonged to any group of whom he spoke disrespectfully. Imagine if President-elect Trump himself, looking at what's going on in the country, looking at the things that I mentioned earlier that are done in hate for some particular groups of people based on their race or whatever it might be. Imagine if he would take the podium. And if today or tomorrow he would stand up and he would say, that is not acceptable. That is not okay. And I'm sorry for anything that I said that might have made people feel like it's safer to do that in this country, because it's not. Imagine what would happen if he would send that clear message to this nation. Those who voted for him. See, it sounds a little different if you post the picture of the racial slurs on a building. See, when the other side posts it, everybody says, oh, you're just whining. You're just a poor loser. I challenge you to be the ones to post it. And to say, this is not what I voted for. To say, this is not Jesus. To say, this is not me. This is not okay. Imagine what it would do for the healing of the nation if those who voted for Donald Trump would take the lead in declaring that's not okay. You get what I'm talking about? And on the other side, if those who didn't would take the lead and talk not about peaceful protest is okay, It may not accomplish anything. Sometimes it does. But violent protest is not okay. Destroying property is not okay. And if the people who voted against Donald Trump for anyone else would stand up instead of making the other side do it and say, I have grave concerns about this country and the direction, but this is not okay. What would that contribute towards peace and working together in the healing of this nation? See, really, this is not just about politics this morning. This is wisdom for all relationships. You thought I was stepping on toes before. Now we're going to talk about marriage. Let's imagine the wife says to her husband, I really feel alone in this relationship. What can the husband do? He can go talk to all his friends and say, that's ridiculous. I come home every night. It's stupid for her to feel that way. She has no basis for feeling that way. You see the relationship improving, don't you? Oh, it's human nature to justify. It's human nature to come up with all the kinds of reasons why those feelings are not valid. But imagine if instead of arguing, he listens. He begins to hear there's a difference between being physically present and being relationally present. He says, wow. I'm going to take it upon myself to be a champion and a defender of my wife. I'm going to look not to my own interests, I'm going to look to her interests. And I'm going to personally take responsibility. She should not have to come tell me day after day that she feels lonely in this relationship. I should be the one to even regularly check in. And man, this is hard, and I'm not suggesting I do this very often at all. It's easier just to not say anything and hope that it goes away, right? I should be the one to bring it up and say, I'm really working, I'm trying, if I am. How's it going in this area? Because I really want to take responsibility for your needs. And it could be all kinds of lesser areas. It could be, let's take a breath. Okay, man, relax a little bit. And step back. Let's say it's just your favorite food or your favorite restaurant. Instead of always being concerned and telling how often we get to eat at my favorite restaurant, imagine every time the subject comes up about where should we go to eat, your first thought is what's hers. And you say, well, it's been a while since we've been to yours. Should we go to yours? Imagine if that was always your first impulse, your first response. In 99 marriages out of 100, she's going to become a champion for yours. She's going to say, oh, well, actually, we did that 2 weeks ago, but why don't we go to yours? And what's the future of that relationship look like? Pretty promising, doesn't it? You can apply this in different areas. The teenager says to his parents, you never listen to me. The parent gets offended and says, what do you mean? Okay, I'm listening now. Go ahead, talk. Come on, talk. Say it. You've got something to say. Say it right now. All right, don't you ever say that to me again. I gave you a chance. You didn't say anything. It happens. It happens often. And it's happening in our country now. Churches. Not here. I'm serious. I mean, maybe to some extent. This has no reflection on disunity here in this congregation. But there are issues that can come up in church life. Age groups. Oh, we need people to work in the nursery. Oh, I did my time. I didn't have help when I was their age. They just got to buck up. Well, yeah, what's the future of that church look like? How different is it if we don't have to wait for people in particular age groups with their struggles or needs to say, I need help here? But if we would become champions for each other's needs and struggles at whatever age they are, whatever stage in life. You see how it works? We listen. We understand. We become an advocate. You say, well, how does that work politically? It can. I heard a very simplistic explanation of the divide between Democrat and Republican, or between liberal and conservative. And it's a simplification, I know that. But this individual said, this country is dedicated to liberty and justice. But liberty and justice sometimes are in conflict with each other. And you have one side of the political spectrum that's really all about liberty, except for a few particular issues, and then we are more about justice. Okay? Well, I'll just say what I'm talking about. I want to talk about the conservative side, the Republican platform, pretty much talking more about liberty. But then there's that abortion issue. And we feel very strongly that that's a justice issue. That's wrong to take life, human life, especially in the last trimester, but really anywhere along there. And that becomes a justice issue, doesn't it? It's interesting how that flips, because then the other side that's primarily a justice issue and seeking justice for all people, but now it becomes liberty, a woman's right to choose. That's a liberty issue, right? So even that gets a little conflicted, doesn't it? But you see how justice and liberty often conflict with each other. And in order to provide justice, sometimes we give up certain liberties. The person who is suggesting this says we need both. This country desperately needs both. If it just goes off the deep end with justice, then we lose all liberty. If it's just do whatever we want, if it's all liberty, then where's the sense of justice that the Scriptures are so filled with calls for the church to address, and for nations too? But what if, along with our convictions about what government ought to be, what if I'm a Republican, I also become a champion for issues where I can of justice? And I temper my call for liberty with the sense of justice for all people. What if I'm motivated and I'm passionate about justice issues, I regularly come back and say, yes, but how does this impact personal liberties? And where is the right balance? We can. We can. In a nation where that happens, I think there's a bright future for that nation. Well, you've listened a lot this morning. I'm not going to give you a chance to speak now to come up here. But, I know you'll do speaking. I hope you will do speaking. I hope you'll process. I hope you'll talk. I hope you'll listen. I hope you'll pray. I hope you'll reflect. But I want to finish by saying I wore what I wore last week on purpose, because the truth of God's kingdom has not changed. We've had an election, but I wanted to represent that nothing has changed. And once again, this was my attempt at purple. I think you understand that. I did consider two other ties this morning. I did find somewhere, unless someone's taken them, I did find that Noah had in his closet one that to many of you is going to look more purple. And I would agree, probably it is a little more purple than this one. It was a little smaller, and I wasn't sure it was going to fit last week, and so, but I decided not to do that. I did consider actually putting this one on this morning. I really didn't like, it's kind of white, I really didn't like how it is. I don't know where I got it from or whatever, but this is the one that I really want to hold up this morning. When I said no, surrender, that's not where we are. My meaning last week was as sons and daughters of the kingdom of God, No, this is not time to surrender, to give up. And I don't mean to take this nation back. In the words of the song we sang that maybe you weren't able to see, I mean to win this nation. It's not about power and authority. It's not about wielding political power for the kingdom of God. It's about building bridges into the hearts and lives of individuals. And when I say surrender, I mean surrender my rights. I mean surrender my way and my interest, out of desire to reach other people with the love and grace of Jesus Christ. I mean ultimately to surrender myself to God Himself. Surrender my politics to Him. Surrender my ideas, my understanding of what needs to happen. All of that, to surrender it to Him. And the words of the song we're about to sing, to not just sing the words, but to truly make it our prayer. God, have your own way. You are the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me after your will while I am waiting, yielded and still, with the ultimate goal that fill with thy Spirit till all may see Christ only, always.